Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when this finds you. Just want to talk a little bit about a subject area that a lot of us have thought over the years that it's beneficial to us, but looking at all of the evidence and looking at everything that's happened up to this point, I have to disagree. And I'm going to mention a few quotes. Frederick Douglass, a guy named myranjones, and I think I might mention something by Francis Cress Welsing and Tony Brown, I believe, somewhere throughout the conversation. I'm going to start out reading a quote from Frederick Douglass and then get into some commentary, and then later on I'll let you know when I'm going to mention those other quotes. But Frederick Douglass said this: independence is an essential condition of respectability. To be dependent is to be degraded. Men may indeed pity us, but they cannot respect us. We do not mean that they can become entirely dependent of all men. That would be absurd and impossible in the social state. But we mean that we must become equally independent with other members of the community. That other members of the community shall be as dependent upon us as we upon them. That such is not now the case is too plain to need an argument. The houses we live in are built by white men. The clothes we wear are made by white tailors. The hats on our heads are made by white hatters. And the shoes on our feet are made by white shoemakers. And the food that we eat is raised and cultivated by white men. Now, it is impossible that we should ever be respected as a people while we are so universally and completely dependent upon white men for the necessaries of life. We must make white persons as dependent on us as we are on them. And I mean, that's a powerful statement by Frederick Douglass. And you think about the time that Frederick Douglass lived and those words that he said, and you look at how we're living right now, and we still have a dependent relationship. And we complained of segregation, and we wanted integration within a larger American body. And the mere fact that we wanted integration meant disintegration of everything that our ancestors fought and bled to build. Now, I know many of you say that things, that was separate but equal. You go back to Plessy versus Ferguson and all of that stuff, and you'll say, they had their facilities, we had our facilities. And I've stated before, why beg to be around people who don't want to be around you? And you've heard it in my videos. I'm not talking about all whites. I'm not talking about all blacks. But I'm just saying, and look at the whole. And so integration destroyed our businesses. Integration destroyed our collective economics. Integration destroyed the cohesive black family units. Integration destroyed the role models we had in our communities. Integration destroyed our initiative to do for ourselves. Integration destroyed our love for our HBCUs. Integration destroyed many of our thriving black neighborhoods and communities. Now, I'm not speaking of the ones that were destroyed from the outside white influence. We think of Tulsa, Black Wall Street. You go over to Durham, North Carolina, the Negro Wall Street, and what's that eminent domain has done in a lot of that over there. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the ones that were still in place. I'm not talking about Rosewood. I'm talking about like the Black Bottom. I'm talking about Auburn Avenue and the Black Business District and places like that. And I've mentioned a lot of others, and I even wrote about them in my book. But hey, what do I know? Available through me at myranjones@gmail.com, available at Barnes & Noble, available at Amazon. And a link will be included in the description box. So those are the neighborhoods I'm talking about, the ones that we let go to shambles. and because we left them in order to live around people who didn't want to be around us. And we lost practically all of our white collar workers to integration, which placed an economic bust over a period of time. Many of our doctors, lawyers, architects, nurses, accountants, and business owners ran to the other side of town when the legal system said, let a few of them in. And amazingly, we expect the law to make what's right when morality and common sense say it's wrong. The legal system said slavery was legitimate, but we all know it was immoral, and common sense said it was wrong. We've heard the term white flight, in which every time too many black folks move into an area, there's a mass white exodus. But right after the white flight takes place, black flight is right behind it. The further out whites move, further out we follow. We need to understand that whites are paid at higher rates than black in many, but not all cases. So they have a little bit more economic reserves than we do as a people. So we follow them out to the suburbs, and the suburbs keep extending over the course of years. We left the homes we grew up in and our parents worked hard to obtain, and now those properties are being sold dirt cheap to home buying companies because we left them sitting unattended, and now they're dilapidated. And with them being dilapidated, we don't have the resources to come back in and repair them, so we turn around and jump at the first offer that's thrown our way. Think we've gotten something for nothing because our parents paid for the house, not for us. And I know it's pricey to do work in the older neighborhoods. Right now we're getting work done. We're in an older house. We're in the house that my wife grew up in, and we're getting some work done, and it's costing a pretty good penny. So I'm not going to say it's the cheapest thing to do, especially with the way prices have jumped on all home building supplies and things like that. But we jump at the first offer thrown our way, thinking we've gotten something for nothing, because it didn't cost us anything to build a house. It cost our parents their hard sweat and tears. And those same whites that we kept running behind were saving up money, the extra money they earn from the overpayments they get on the job. I'm not going to say overpayments, but the extra pay they got on the job for the same work you were doing. Because they out earn us. So they saved up down payments, and they go into those home builders that's buying up the inner city homes now. And those home builders are building low to mid to high six-figure properties on the same pieces of land we abandoned. So those homes that they're building now on those pieces of land are worth 5, 6, 7 times what they valued those homes at when we lived in them. And even now, if you go in as a black person and build a home in that same area as a black person, your home is going to be valued at less than half of what it's going to be valued at if a white person owned. I don't know if y'all saw the story here recently over in, I believe, San Francisco. A black couple went to get their home appraised, and when they were doing it, the company appraised it for them at $900,000. Well, they made the house look more white. They took all the photos out of the house that showed anything black. They took all of the black influence of artwork and things out of the house and put it up. And then they had a friend of theirs who's white go and say they wanted to get the house appraised. With a mere fact that their white friend went in the house as if he lived there, they appraised the house at $1.6 million. So it's still going on right today. And so they're trying to push blacks out of the inner city now because they covet that low property, low prices on that property. And that's why they tell you the crime is so bad in the black communities, because they want to scare black people out. White people know it's really not that high, but they'll get on the news and tell you that the crime is so bad. The highest crime rate in the city of Houston area is in Sugar Land, Texas. But Sugar Land, Texas get praised as one of the highest rated communities in this whole city of Houston and the whole state of Texas. I live in an area called Sunnyside. Sunnyside has been ranked in the top 10 in the nation between 6 and 7 the last several years as one of the most violent communities in the whole nation. So how did Sunnyside not make the top 10 in the Houston area, but Sunnyside made the top 10 in the nation, and Sugar Land didn't? Because see, they're programming you. They're programming you that black is bad, white is good. And so we keep running behind white folks, and they saving up their money so they can move back in. And they got us to move way out there, keep following them, and then they moved back in and bought the abandoned properties that we left years ago. Didn't pay the taxes, and so now the taxes are in arrears. Didn't keep the house up, so now the house is in shambles. And so when you add those two influences together, the value of the house dropped substantially. So they done moved back in, but you can't afford to move back in because you don't make as much money as they do. So now it costs more for you to get back into work. It costs for more for you to come back in and enjoy the amenities that you ran away from. You see, here in the city of Houston, where I live, 10 miles from downtown Houston. Downtown also has a soccer stadium. Downtown also has all the nice restaurants, the nicest hotel in the Houston area with the big Texas-shaped swimming pool. It also houses Toyota Center where the Houston Rockets play. It also houses Minute Maid Park where the Astros play. So that's within 10 miles of my house. A little bit over 9 to be exact, right under 10. Then a few miles before you get into there, you got the medical center, and you got the stadium where the Texans play. So you got the light rail system right there. You got all the toll roads right there. And so easy access, but we ran away from it. So now it costs us more to move back in and enjoy everything we ran away from. And so the government is so benevolent that they are now allow us to pay taxes to drive on the new toll roads that were built with tax dollars, but they call it bond money. Isn't that amazing how that works? So not only are gas prices going up, depending on what time of day you drive the toll road, the toll changes. Now, integration caused us to lose everything our ancestors had built. Then the folks we integrated with left us and moved into our communities and built businesses in the places where we formerly had ours. Then the banks refused to give us loans for anything. See, we need to come together in our own communities and fix the problems that exist and stop ignoring and start to ignore what the media says. If the government wanted to fix our problem, they would have by now. It's amazing that the place we felt was not good enough for us is now good enough for the people who didn't want to be around us. How does that make you feel? And the way things are going, they have no plans on being around you right today. So now what you gonna do? You're gonna run to your daddy government and ask them to create more legislation because we become segregated again? You're not gonna get any more legislation going forward, trust me. I remember the guy that was the best man I'm with, a Hispanic guy, and he told me years ago when we were back in college, dude, he said, they don't put Hispanic or Latino on our birth certificates, they put white on our birth certificate. And I just saw a young lady, Asian young lady, that said now they're talking about Asians are going to be listed as white on their birth certificates. Now, I don't know how true it is, but that came from an Asian lady. I don't know which part of Far East she's from. I don't know, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese. I don't know. She just said their birth certificates are going to start saying white. And she said, so now I'm white now, according to the system. So I don't know. So if everybody else is listing white, that means there's only two choices, white or black. And I've already talked about how some of the other communities and cultures think about black people too. But what we need to understand is that integration was nothing more than a control mechanism that had been pushed by white skinned Americans as far back as the 1800s, right before slavery had ended. And the timer wasn't right at the time, though, because blacks wanted no part of white America back then, because, I mean, I can't say all whites were slave owners. It was a certain class of white that was a larger slave owner, but I've talked about that on some other stuff. And, you had black slave owners too. But black wanted no part of white America. That's why all those black organizations started springing up. And the first one I came across, I mean, there was some others before then, but first one I saw that kind of came together and started talking about economics was an organization called the National Convention of Colored Men of America. And they actually got together. They were free blacks and former slaves who got together. And that organization ran up until the mid 1880s. And you start looking around that time, it was black folks was coming up economically in every industry that was prevalent. And the NAACP was actually the first plank toward integration. It started as a white organization with a black face to infiltrate the successful black organization in order to start black economic progress. Don't take my word for nothing. Study for yourself. And I think it was 60 founding members, and I think 7 of them was black or something like that. And so, look at what happened to the National Negro Business League once Booker T. Washington died. And then you look at the assault that they had against Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. And the NAACP had the government go after Marcus Garvey. And so the two black organizations that were actually teaching and promoting blacks business ownership, entrepreneurship, and self-sufficiency were actually attacked by the so-called black organization, which never built anything and taught victimhood. It was a hustling organization. And we see how that's worked out for us. Integration was nothing more than a plot to keep an eye on black economic progress and make sure it did not advance anymore. Now, I'm going to read you something from Tony Brown, because we have this mindset that we need to vote harder. We need to make sure we get out to vote. Rock the vote. Walk the neighborhood. One time they even knocked on my door, "Who you voting for? None of your business," is what I told them. Coming to my house, "Have you voted yet?" "No." "Who you voting for? None of your business. Get on away from here." I told them just like that. Get off my property. Come here asking me no stuff like that. Ain't your business. You just worry about who you vote for. But here's something that Tony Brown said. He said, "Other ethnic groups such as Chinese, Koreans, and Cubans concentrate their energies on mastering the tactics of the free market. Their shared heritage is the key to their success. They ignore both assimilation and the melting pot myth. They ignore both assimilation and the melting pot myth. They ignore both assimilation and the melting pot myth." See, the overachievement demonstrates that group unity is simply more powerful than racist opposition. Members of these groups work together and trust one another, not in spite of, but because of their tradition of strong ethnic ties. Now, I remember being in elementary school around the 4th grade is when I started being taught about the melting pot. And how everybody come here, and assimilating, being one big family. We ain't never been to one big family here. Even 9/11 was a false family reunion. But we got that. And these other people, they come in and they work within, but they stay without. And what I mean by that is they work within the American system during the day, but they stay away from the American system once they get away from the job. And you think about back then, we were building all these successful black organizations when racism was a lot more prevalent than it is now. So we need to understand that. There's another guy, Myran Johnson. He gave a speech in 1958. And this is what he said. "Some of the liberals and the communists and all of that ilk, along with the NAACP leaders, have been demanding more and more federal power. They want laws to turn the FBI into the Gestapo to hunt down everybody who disagrees with integration. They even propose laws that give the federal government the right to step in the states and arrest governors. They want to take away all power from the states. And when this sort of thing happens, then we're on the road to dictatorship. And once you have given the federal government that power, it can be used against you, depending on who sees the control of the federal government." I mean, listening to those words of Myran Johnson is a perfect example of what we're dealing with today. More federal power and less freedom. I mean, y'all, I don't know if y'all heard a few weeks back when the Supreme Court came and said, pump the brakes on the mandates. And then Jen Psaki came behind the Supreme Court and said, well, it wasn't the Supreme Court, the federal court, I think the 5th Circuit federal court, and well, we're confident that our mandates are going to stand because federal power trumps state power. Well, see, obviously Jen Psaki never read the Constitution, because federal power does not trump state power if you're doing it the right way. Gotta throw that in there. And when they come around and say, well, forget what the federal court says, you go ahead and do what I say. I mean, you already in a dictatorship, you just don't realize it. Now, think about this. Business ownership equals competition and actually fewer black dollars going into the white establishments. The talent intent mentality was equal integration, in my opinion, because they wanted the white universities instead of the HBCUs. Now, isn't it amazing that most of your black proponents of integration went to predominantly white schools? Now, I'm not saying white schools are bad. I'm just saying, because I went to a predominantly white school, university. But mine was based on lack of economics. Because I really wanted to go to HBCU, Prairie View A&M University, about 60 miles north of Houston. It was a kind of like a family school. Mother went there, aunt went there, two sisters went there. And so, you know, I wanted to go there because I wanted to be a chemical engineer. But I also wanted to play football, and at the time they had suspended the football program. I think because they had lost like 100 games in a row or something. So they just suspended the program for a while. And so I didn't have them. Parents didn't have, I didn't have any money to go stay on campus or anything even back then. I got accepted into Baylor University for my academics, and they asked for my deposit. I didn't even have a deposit to send in for Baylor. Baylor also had a very excellent engineering program as well, so I ended up at the University of Houston by default. It's right down the street from home. They had an excellent engineering program. It didn't make sense for me to go to Texas Southern because Texas Southern has a great pharmacy program. I wasn't going to school to be a pharmacist. So mine was just process of elimination, financial elimination. And so if we look at civil rights was nothing more than a plank of integration. And, you know, if you want to hear a little bit more about civil rights, I have a video on this channel called Civil Rights Was Wrong. And I'll go into a lot more detail on that. And, you know, take a listen to it. I might try to remember to link that to it. But the end result of integration is that blacks are worse off now economically. Now, don't get it twisted about that $1 trillion spending power, because we ain't holding on to none of it. So we're worse off economically. We're fattening up the pocket of every other culture and ethnic group in this country except our own. I mean, if you live in a predominantly black area, I mean, I can drive through and we don't have what we would term a major grocery store around. We don't have a major oil change place around. We don't have no car dealerships around, and we don't have no Walmarts around. We don't have any. We don't have. Well, I'm trying to think. It was something else I was thinking about. I can't think of it right now. But we do got a whole bunch of hole in the wall fried chicken places, fried fish places, hair weave places. Service is terrible in all of them. And customer service doesn't exist. You get your lower grade produce and things like that. And we wonder, a few farmers markets are popping up here every now and then, but they're not surviving. So we're worse off economically. We don't have any major hospitals nowhere near us. We don't have any major urgent care centers nowhere near us. We don't have any major law firms or doc office anywhere near us. And we're worse off economically today than we were back then, because we moved away from business ownership. We moved away from entrepreneurship. We moved away from self-sufficiency. Now, if we study black codes, Jim Crow laws, and the high incarceration rate of black males, all of that came after the fight for integration. Jim Crow and the black codes came about in the early 20th century with Du Bois and the NAACP, and high incarceration rate came after civil rights legislation. Don't take my word for that. Check it out for yourself. So I'm going to close out with one more quote by Myran Johnson's speech from 1958, because I'm trying to keep my videos right now 30 minutes and under. And so I'm going to close out with this one. Myran Johnson said, "The Negro intellectual is so sold on integration that he doesn't see the necessity of doing anything for his race, by his race, and with his race. He has naturally an inferiority complex himself, and he wants to get lost and swallowed up in a white group." End quote. Now, you see, black intellectuals want access to white America because they don't think they should get their hands dirty and create some sweat equity. All they want is crumbs from the table of white America. Talk to you later.